Let's kick things off. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming along to this policy exchange event. The title of the event is What Can the Conservatives Do to Win More Urban Seats? Just to give it a bit of background, and I'm going to plug a piece of work the Policy Exchange did actually 2 years ago called Northern Lights, copies of which you can pick up at the back. We looked at sort of the question about the North-South divide and whether it truly existed for the Conservative Party, and it's not really a North-South divide. The issue is more urban-rural. That is the real problem for the Conservative Party. If you look actually, if you took the Trans-Pennine Express from Liverpool to Newcastle, you'll actually find that 13 of the stops are in Conservative-held seats and 19 are in Labour. So the real divide is not the North versus the South, it is the more urban versus rural. We're also going to talk about sort of the issue of London. So London is an interesting phenomenon where you have Labour holding 20 to 32 boroughs compared to the Tories having 9. Now, you would imagine London is a Labour city, yet Boris Johnson has won 2 consecutive mayoral elections. So we're going to ask the panel again, how has he done that? How has he revived urban conservatism? And lastly, why do urban voters tend not to vote Conservatives? Is it class, ethnicity? Is it policy? Is it people within the party? And what can the party do to rectify the situation? Especially as the most effective way, in terms of policy exchanges view, the most effective way of delivering sustained economic growth is you need to rebuild your cities, both in London and expand your urban hubs around the country, whilst obviously making sure that rural and coastal towns do not suffer as a result. So lots to consider. We've got a stellar panel for you today. I'm going to introduce you to, starting on my right, with Richard Harrington. Richard is the MP for Watford and has been since May 2010. He was born in Leeds, eldest son of a shopkeeper, and he is also the vice chairman of the Conservative Party. Watford's one of the key swing seats.
Yes, a 3-way margin.
To my immediate right is Michael Liebreich, who is the founder of Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which was the world's leading provider of information on clean energy to investors, energy companies and governments. He holds a number of positions, but the real reason we've actually got him on this panel is there has been a lot of speculation that, including him topping the list of Paddy Power nominations, is that whether he may at some point throw his name in the mayoral ring for 2016. Announcement today? Ooh. Who knows? To my far left is...
By you?
By me. To my far left is Paul Uppal. Paul is the Member of Parliament for Wolverhampton South West, was a former PPS to David Willits, and is a member of the Number 10 Policy Board. And to my immediate left is obviously Greg Clark. Greg brought up in Middlesbrough, studied economics at Cambridge before earning his PhD at the London School of Economics. Before working in politics, Greg worked for the Boston Consulting Group and head of commercial policy at the BBC. He was appointed Shadow Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change in October 2008. In 2010, he was appointed Minister of State at DCLG, and in 2011, appointed Minister for Cities. Most recently, he's been appointed Minister for University, Science and Cities in the last reshuffle. I'm going to ask Greg to kick us off. We're going to have 5 to 7 minutes each with our speakers, and then we're going to open up to the floor and make it as a lively a discussion as possible. So over to you, Greg.
Well, thanks, Edward. You mentioned the Northern Lights report, and it is a fantastic report. Anyone that hasn't read it, do pick up a copy, because it is very substantial piece of work, and I think the conclusion is absolutely right. That if you look at the big opportunity for the party, there is a common denominator of urban areas where we can make real progress. And if you look back to the last election, we were about 20 seats short of a majority. Look in the list of target seats that we were hoping to win. Actually, there is a striking difference. 3/4 of the seats that we missed in that target seat list were seats either in London or in the former northern metropolitan boroughs of Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield and Newcastle. So 3/4 of the misses were in these urban seats, as you might call them, urban or suburban seats. A fifth of the gains that we made were in the urban seats. So if we had done better in the seats that looked to our big urban centres at the last election, we would now have a very comfortable majority. So it seems to me that there is an electoral imperative to take very seriously cities. But there's also an economic imperative. We know that not just in this country, but all around the world, interesting, there's a time when it's not necessary for people to live close together. In the digital age, we can all live on the top of mountains and communicate remotely. But just at this time, people are choosing to come together and live in cities all around the world as never before. For the first time in 2005, humanity became a predominantly urban species. More people lived in and around cities from 2005 than at any point in human history. The trends are all in that direction. The Conservatives always at its best when it is looking to the future, and this is, I think, the right focus for us. What to do? How can we increase the representation that we have in our urban areas? I think the first thing that we need always to do is to be as enthusiastic and as interested and as passionate about cities and about our urban areas as we are about rural areas and about the country as a whole. And that hasn't always been the case. If you look back in decades past, when we talked about cities as a party, not now, thankfully, when we talked about cities as a party, we tended to talk about the inner cities. And even the terminology, the inner cities, it was to convey a set of problems. Some of those problems are still there, but actually the possibilities, the debate internationally, and what everyone that lives and works in and around cities sees, cities as being positive forces, people that attract people who choose to live there, who love where they live. And so I think conveying that enthusiasm, as we have done successfully amongst the people that have succeeded, whether it's Boris, whether it's Richard here in Watford, whether it's Paul in Wolverhampton. I see people in the room representing cities around the country. This is, I think, the language that we need to reflect in our communications. The second thing is, and you wouldn't be surprised, people who know me, that I should say this, is that we need to be the party of localism. We need to be the party that empowers our cities. It seems to me, if I can put it this way, that a conservative view of society is that if you take decision-making powers away from people and you vest it in the state, then people become less entrepreneurial, more dependent, and ultimately less fulfilled and more socialist. And it seems to me the same is true of our cities and urban areas. If you make them dependent on applications for funds from London, if you don't let them initiate things, if you don't provide any reward for success, if you tell them what to do, then they'll become adept and expert at looking to central government rather than initiating and being entrepreneurial and buccaneering for themselves. And that is not a demeanour that is very conservative. So it is, I think, authentically conservative to be empowering cities. We need to change the question from what can the government do for these cities to how we can help the cities do things for themselves. And that is something that I think we have been making a big difference over. The next point I would make is that there's the old expression that Tip O'Neill, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, used to use, all politics is local. I think it goes beyond that, even, I would say. I think increasingly politics is personal. And whether it is in the presence of the Mayor of London, known to everyone in London, whether it is in Greater Manchester, where we've had highly successful leadership in Trafford that has bucked the trend and even in the most recent elections increased the the Conservative representation there, very much down to the work of Susan Williams, Matt Coolidge and Sean Anstey, who've done that. If you look at Swindon, another urban seat, Rod Blue and David Renard, working very closely with Robert Buckland, Justin Tomlinson, have taken a very personal approach to doing that. I will incur the blushes of my two colleagues here, but Richard and Paul, if you go to Watford, you go to Wolverhampton, they are big. They're a big presence in the local area. They take a personal approach that goes beyond party politics, and they're seen to be champions for their area. It goes into smaller urban areas. In North Lincolnshire, Liz Redfern, very successful leader of the local council there. Here in Birmingham, we had really good election results this year in Birmingham. We gained a couple of seats in what was a tough fight with the Labour Party, almost won many more. Robert Alden leading a group here that is very much taking a personal approach to winning those seats back. The final point I would make is that we should, I think, regard every part of the country as being within our sights in terms of helping empower our cities. We are the One Nation Party. We always have been, and that's because it's always been the case, it's always been clear to us that our responsibilities are to the whole nation. And where there are places where we don't have so many Conservative councils, so many Conservative representatives at the moment, it's not for us to say, well, actually, that's not going to be of interest to us. It is our responsibility as a national party to work for the whole of the country. And where we've done this in the past, I think we have won respect. So if you go to Liverpool these days, and there are probably people here from Liverpool, Michael Heseltine in the 1980s, despite the fact that the Conservative prospects in Liverpool at the time were not rosy, should we say, nevertheless devoted himself with energy and passion to helping Liverpool turn the corner, the results of which are still there to be seen today. And Michael was elected unanimously a Freeman of the City of Liverpool just last year, and the achievements that he's made are still there. And when it comes to reviving our standing in all places in the country, I think to be able to point to putting the nation first and not being motivated by short-term electoral advantage, just as was the case with the Scottish referendum. That, I think, is the demeanour that we should strike as a party, is their authentic demeanour. And so of all the parties, I think our commitment to localism, our concern for one nation, and the attitude that we have to empower our great cities around the country mean that we have all of the ingredients for success and for revival.
Thank you very much. I'm going to lead over straight to Richard to pick up from there.
Thank you. Well, Nick, I'm going to just deal. I can't disagree with anything that Greg said, but I'd just like to. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Conservative Party, but this is my idea for the Conservative Party in this field, because I think one of the reasons we do so badly in many urban areas is because of a significant defect in the organisation of the Conservative Party. Because we're responding, we're still left with the legacy of local associations as our main campaigning tool in places where we really don't have local associations. Because the voluntary party the model works very well in areas where it exists, but we have to accept the fact, for so many different reasons, historical and others, that actually, in much of the country, we actually don't have an organisation for campaigning at all. And the efforts, which I'm very proud of our efforts with the 40-40 group, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, it's public, but we're concentrating efforts on the 40 seats that we need to hold on to from 2010, and the 40 seats that we need to win in order to form an outright majority. This is very well known. We're raising money for it, we have campaign managers, we have leaflets, everything that, I can't say everything that every candidate wants, but it's real concentration of resources. And I'm very proud of that. But We need to have a separate strategy, in my view, and it's something I will be putting forward after the next election in whatever capacity I'm in. There's a lot of people in Watford hope that it will be in a non-parliamentary capacity, but I think we need, in the same way that we've a ring-fence 40/40 operation with its own professional staff, which is actually boosting campaigns out with the voluntary party. I'm not against the voluntary party, so delighted. I mean, my own chairman, Steve O'Brien, is here from Watford, but basically the Conservative Association is yourself, Steve, and 2 or 3 other people. We could not have won an election without concentrated resources. So some of it's financial. We need to raise a block of money, in my opinion, with a 10-year strategy for urban seats. This doesn't mean we're going to produce a victory. It's not fashionable. It's very hard with donors. They want to see quick results. But we need to take a leaf from, I shouldn't say this, for 2 reasons. First of all, because he's a Liberal Democrat, and secondly, because of what happens elsewhere in his private life. But the Renard strategy for Liberal Democrats, which basically involved paid, forget all this lovely, cuddly Liberal Democrats, they put paid people in seats that they wanted to win in 10 and 15 years' time, with his strategy from the pavement to the town hall to Westminster. And they got as far as the town hall in Watford, and they've still got 26 councillors, and we've only got 1. I mean, these people do this very effectively, but it starts with paid people. And it starts with, in their case, they look for places where they had no organisation. And we have to raise a block of money and train field workers to live in places. And okay, there'll be some volunteers, there's always some people to help. But these people have got to have a 5 or 10 year strategy, and you start from the bottom up, which actually now with social media and everything works extremely well. It's much easier than it used to be the hard way with just leafleting and everything like that. But it needs young people who are trained in these things, not an association with a branch that doesn't exist or might exist. And I think whoever is running the party after the election next year, whether it's current chairman and professional staff or somebody else, and either will be fine. We have to concentrate on this as a ring-fence exercise, which means that seats like Paul's and mine, whether we had nothing, it's a scandal that seats that we held years ago, we ended up with no voluntary organisation and no professional organisation to replace it. And as I said, we've got to find some really good benefactors. So we're going to say this is a strategy for the Conservative Party for 2025 or whenever it is, but your money will be paid for somebody to set it all up again, to start off living in some crummy flat in the middle of the place where there are no Conservatives. Start off with just members, because the national, now with the national website and everything, we attract supporters actually in every single constituency, but no one is organising them. Why? Of course not, because David Cameron knows, we all know we've got to win this next election, and this is a second priority. But given the name of this, this panel today, what it's for, this for me it's a medium-term strategy, and in politics, it's always everything short-term. You know, it's like a business. You can't do everything to please your shareholders in your next 6 monthly report. You have to, but someone somewhere has to think of what's going to happen to whatever company it is in 5 years and 10 years' time. And that's what this project needs. The macro stuff, what Greg says is absolutely right. The stuff the government's doing, the stuff that we've got some very enlightened councillors, but in many places we haven't got any councillors. So the party needs to provide the infrastructure to do that. Voluntary infrastructures are fanciful. People don't join things like that anymore. But a good team of professional field workers with their own project, living in places and starting from the bottom upwards, I think it's the key to it. So that's my single message today, but it's something I feel is very important to our future. Thank you.
I think that's a very interesting point. Can I go back at your one point there, Richard? Do you think that clearly the long-term structural issue for the party in certain seats is what you think is the main issue? Where do you think the party is in terms of policy presentation in certain seats? So, for example, if you're looking at more urban seats, so it's younger, it's more ethnically diverse, it's traditionally more liberal. So do you think we've got the policy right and it's just the structure that are the problem?
No, but I'll just make this point. I've bored people at these conferences, much to the annoyance of Michael Ashcroft, about what a candidate is and what an organisation is. Because to me, in a single constituency, the candidate and the Conservative organisation are like McDonald's franchises. They are, if you just bear with me, because this is where policy comes in. So, what someone is responsible for an area with McDonald's. They're given a franchise, which is their territory. So the brand, in their case McDonald's, in our case it's David Cameron and the Conservative Party, is provided by somebody else. The menu, in their case, a whole list of different burgers and things. In the case of the party, it's the menu is different policies, produced either by government or by the research department, if and the shadow team if we're in opposition. So the key to a successful McDonald's franchise, I know you think I've gone mad, Nick.
No,
and I'm very pleased that Dean's here because he's used to my eccentricities like I am to his. But well, we all are to his, aren't we, Greg? But the key, the analogy is that, and I've spoken to a lot of McDonald's franchisees. The clever ones, they pick from the menu depending on their area. So, for example, if you've got a lot of old people, you want to distribute the policies for retired people.
Yeah.
In the same way that the chap who's got the McDonald's in Kensington High Street has his deluxe mega burgers, he doesn't do the 99p specials. And that's the key. So the party organisation, it's part of the selecting from the menu of policies to suit a particular area. And the good thing now, with the social media and everything, it is possible to finesse those things. It's so powerful. We're sending out micro stuff now in Watford, literally to 2 streets, a different leaflet or different pamphlet to 2 streets away from that. And that's something, again, professional organisers, professionally trained, not reliable on. It's very nice to have people to help, and we hope this whole thing would attract volunteers. But the key to it's got to be really professional. But it's a distribution of that product, and the government's producing that product. I see no need for special products. They're on the menu.
Yeah. Michael.
Very interesting, and I agree entirely, and I'll try and build on that. I was going to make a few notes about the challenges, how in cities you have to segment, because a city is not homogeneous in the same way that rural constituencies are, and how one has to send tailored messages and so on, and then you talk about the infrastructure. But let me just start by saying, I'll come back to those issues, but let me start by saying, there is still a failure, to my mind, in terms of just owning cities. I don't think we own cities. So I go back to when I joined the Conservative Party. It was actually the day after the defeat in 1997. And I thought this would be a very interesting time because the party would have to renew and it'd have to rethink. And I was an urban young professional, young at the time. And I did 2 things. I signed up for Private Eye and the Conservative Party. I thought that would be a good sort of balance. And I got Private Eye, and I thought this is fabulous stuff, very entertaining. And then I got this magazine called Heartland, which had a picture of, at the time, it's William Hague. I had a wonderful speech yesterday, but William Hague, and he was wearing a Barber jacket, and he was with a sheep. I thought this was a fabulous special issue of Private Eye. It turned out that no, it was actually the magazine of the Tory party. And I thought, hang on a second, maybe I made a huge mistake here. And so we've been through a number of electoral cycles, which we all know about before 2010, where we sort of retreated into being almost an agrarian party. And we have to fight our way back from that. And I think we're still not quite there where we can with confidence say, we are the party of cities. Look at what's going on in cities around the world. You've got the urbanization trend that Greg talked about, but it's also a transformation. It's not just, we're not talking Nairobi and Delhi and favelas. We're talking about transformation that is happening in existing cities. Right? And it's all about livability. It's about competing for the creative industries, the mobile workforce, and so on, and also using the technologies and the approaches that are now at our disposal. These are transport technologies, everything from just basic light rail all the way through to the clever stuff of Uber and so on. But also, all this talk about smart cities, absolutely meaningless as a slogan, But what it's all about is livability, provision of those urban services. And there's a transformation going on. And at this point, we don't own that narrative. We're not seen as really legitimate on city issues. And I think partly it's a self-confidence issue, if I might say. The second thing is then, if you're talking about the messaging, and you're absolutely right about segmentation. Cities are not, even constituencies, even streets are not homogeneous. And I think that's something that we haven't, we have to have the infrastructure to respond, but we have to start by understanding that cities are made up of all different segments. So the old people who've got huge houses that are empty nesters are terrified about the mansion tax. You've got people who are not born in London or in cities, but have arrived usually to work there, and are now voting, have completely different interests and completely different concerns. And I think that we've got to have, for each of these, I think your idea of the McDonald's menu, of saying, well, let's segment, for each of those segments, whatever they might be, people with young kids, the old people with asset rich and cash poor, those people who've just come to our cities to work but don't know if they're going to stay or return home, those people who are squeezed working class, who are seeing that their spending power is being eroded and they don't know what's going to happen next. We've got to have conservative men. We've got to start by saying, this is our issue, we can solve this, and then we've got to segment down and say, right, which of the policies are attractive to each of those, and we've got to have the delivery mechanisms. And I think professional organisers, part of my life I spent in competitive sports, and I saw sports go from complete amateurism, almost by fiat. It was, the Olympics was amateur, but so was all the organisation. Let me tell you, as an athlete, it was totally amateur how we were managed. We went from that, through the application of money and professionalism, to being fourth on the medal table at London 2012. So I completely agree with that process. I would add to it the sorts of technology that is required in terms of the software and the use of software to manage those campaigns. We will look back at this period and with amusement in 10 or 15 years at the level of technical sophistication. But the technology won't win us elections, but we need the technology to manage all of those micro menus that we need to do. And then just finally, just back to something that Greg said, which is incredibly important. I've had the great privilege of working reasonably closely with Boris on Transport for London. And the single thing to my mind that sets him apart from most other politicians is he is relentlessly optimistic. I've seen him be optimistic in situations that call for great pessimism. But he is optimistic. He just projects the aura that we will solve these problems. It won't be perfect, it won't be easy. We will solve these problems. And unless we start with that sort of an aura around us, which we can borrow from Boris now that he's back on the pitch, as we say, I think that is also critically important because cities are future-looking. They're not protecting us; they're building, and they're full of people who have chosen to be in those cities actively and for a reason. And we have to reflect their optimism.
Thank you, Michael. Paul.
One of the problems with going last on these panels is first of all, you never know what to expect when you sort of. If I never expected an analogy to a McDonald's franchise. If I might talk about getting magazines with a man and a sheep on the cover, I'd always be wary of that, but that's a different story anyway. A general sort of background, and I'm going to sort of lay out a few bullet points, and then I explain why I'm going to say these things. City, where we're holding conference, when I was growing up as a teenager, was represented by, in Edgbaston, we had Dame Jill Knight. In Selly Oak, we had Anthony Beaumont Dark. In Northfield, we had Roger King. So it was quite natural within Birmingham as a city to have Conservative members of Parliament. There wasn't a natural sort of fit from that perspective. Going back to Greg's point that he opened up with in terms of when you looked at election results, my own constituency of Wolverhampton South West is 40% BME. It's the only seat we hold outside of London with a BME population over 20%. It's entirely urban, takes in the centre of the city. It's one of those seats which we probably struggled with on election night. I was selected through an open primary. There are a couple of people in this room who were there on the evening as well. And on the open primary, which was held at the Molyneux, home of the Wolves, 400 people turned out on a Friday night to vote for who was going to be the Conservative candidate. By that process alone, it actually told the association something about some of the candidates in terms of just their natural connection with the seat. I'm going to try and talk about how all the things that have been raised by the previous panelists, how you can actually turn that into a tangible, real example. A lot of young Asian voters and other non-Asian voters who voted for me primarily not because I'm a Conservative. They voted for me because they knew my family and the background of my own work within the constituency. I'm a trustee of the second largest Sikh temple within the constituency and within the city as a whole. And that personal brand is very important. And the reason I want to raise that is because if there's one thing I found very difficult with the party over the 4 years I've been a member of Parliament, again and again the discussion always comes about, Paul, what's the silver bullet? What is the easy answer on this? And of course there isn't. It's a long-term project. And if the vote on Scotland proves anything recently, it is that we are incredibly poor at making this simple point, and that's having an emotional connection. If people do not trust our motives and who we are and where we're coming from, it doesn't matter about our policies. It doesn't matter about our McDonald's menu or whether we're offering 3 for 1 or whatever, or chicken McNuggets free on a Tuesday and an Orange Wednesday or whatever. You're just not going to get your message here. And if you don't believe me, when I go out canvassing and I see people who are lifelong Labour voters, they have an appetite for a right-of-centre message. If you take the Conservative badge away and you put UKIP on it, and I know we're probably going to talk about this as well later on, people will be attracted towards that. So that is the main problem we have. The branding image we have in terms of making that emotional connection is something that is incredibly difficult. It's not going to change overnight. It's not easy to do. But I think individual candidate selection in seats, picking them early, picking them local, picking them on a doorstep where they can actually make a connection is incredibly important. I have lots of my colleagues, I'm not including Greg and Richard in this because they know that, who will say, Paul, I'd love to come and knock on doors and help in your patch. And I'm really flattered by the fact they want to do that. But I can tell you, that is the last thing I need in some of my elements of my constituency. I always use this measure, and I was sitting next to a colleague the other day, and we were actually thinking about this, saying, if I'm going out on Friday night in a pub in Wolverhampton, how many of my colleagues around me would I actually feel comfortable taking them in and introducing to my constituents? I'm not going to name any names, but it was a short list, let me put it that way. And that, I guess, encapsulates some of the points that I wanted to sort of make today. I do not come from this from any holier-than-thou sort of mechanism. I don't mean it from any sort of perspective. But what I do say from this is, it gives you credibility when you actually highlight those things. So when I go into schools, if I can, I try and go to a school every Friday, and I talk to the children about my own experience of education. Going from being born in Smethwick, going to a state school, being the only Asian kid in a state school for 3 years, kept in a remedial class because they thought I couldn't speak English. The guy comes up to me, speaks for me for 10 minutes. He said, Paul, you can speak English? I said, I can read it too, sir. If Mr. Breeden hadn't had that 10-minute conversation with me, would I be a member of Parliament? Absolutely not. And the moment I say that, you can see the kids, their eyes light up, because all of a sudden they think, do you know what, he's just not giving me the normal rhetoric BS that I'm going to expect from a Tory politician. And at least at that point, it gets you to the door. Going through the door is a different process, and that is then Richard's point and Greg's point, Michael's point about the policies and the opportunities. We can talk about social mobility, that we are the party who are going to get you on that ladder. We are the party who are not going to write you off. Just because you're a young kid in Wolverhampton, there shouldn't be any limit on your ambition. But the point is credibility. That's the most important thing that we need to do when we sort of open that door. The second point I want to make is, you know, Nick, you made this point about what are the contrasts? Is it urban, is it rural, is it northern, is it south? For me, what I find more than anything else, the number one driver is if you look at the stats on JSA claimants. If it's under 3% in a constituency, we as a party win over 250 out of 300 seats. The moment it goes over 3%, we win less than 20%. And we win seats with high BME populations, which is why we have the problem outside of London in particular. My own seat, sorry to see macho about this, we have no other Conservative held seats where the JSA claimant is in the top 100. I sit there fairly uncomfortably at number 35. But you can actually talk about how you can turn the city around, have a positive narrative about that. But if they do not believe you, if you are not credible, if you do not have that positive backstory, or being authentic like Boris, however it is perceived, you cannot get to first base. And that's a problem we have as a party. How do we break that and get to that first base and that first narrative? Once we can do that, we can actually provide the solutions. Because the truth is, my constituency is split between the centre of Wolverhampton, which probably takes about 40% of my constituency, and then about 55%, which is just suburban. So that's a sort of mix. 80% of my casework comes from the centre of the city. The folks on the suburbs, they can look after themselves, they're absolutely fine. But here's the thing, here's the really sad thing about it. The people who need conservative policies the most are those folks in the centre. They want good schools for their kids, they want opportunity, they want education. They just don't trust us to deliver on that. If we can break that, we can actually deliver the policies that we need.
Thank you, Paul. Can I just, I'm going to go back to you on one point. How do you, in terms of widening the base of potential councillors or candidates or MPs amongst the party, how do you go about doing that? I mean, clearly, things like the A-list have been pushed to aside. Are there things like bursary schemes to attract people from lower income backgrounds into politics? I mean, becoming a candidate is a very expensive thing.
It is, I mean, look, it's an incredibly tough question to answer it for this primarily reason, which my wife raises with me almost every morning. How do you get a normal person to be a candidate? Because by de facto, we're not normal people. What are we doing here? I mean, I've got 3 kids, teenage kids from 17 to 7, and how do you get that sort of connection to sort of push out? I think bursaries are an interesting idea. And I think increasingly, when we're looking at the whole route to being a parliamentary candidate and then hopefully being a member of parliament, I think the mentoring that the party has to do has to be much more robust. And if I'm really candid with you, honest. Because, being a candidate, is very, I mean, I ran my own business for 20 years before I became a member of parliament. And very similar from this perspective alone. They are incredibly lonely experiences. Incredibly lonely. And you will need some sort of mechanism. The advantage I have is I have huge support from an extended family network. So when I could come, and that was, they'd sort of plaster me up and give me some alcohol and say, go on, round 2, go and fight. That sort of thing. You need that sort of mechanism. Yeah. And you see this in social mobility as well, because generally, why do people succeed in life? It's due to resilience. When you sort of see your peer group who you're competing against, they may be no more able than you. But that resilience which you can get maybe from an independent school, maybe from a loving family, maybe from a wider extended family. But if the party can in some way provide that mechanism, I think it'd be a huge asset. But it's not an easy thing to do.
Nick, may I add a point on that? Because the current candidate system, it's the same in the Labour Party. There's a bucket of candidates. We've got about 700 people on the candidates list. And there's such a huge difference between running for a safe seat. And I know everyone's got this cliche, there's no such thing as a safe seat. And somebody I know who better remain nameless, she got a good rural seat in the east of England. She's panicking because it's a 9,000 majority and there's no association, there's no money and all that kind of stuff. But no one tells candidates what it's like in a marginal seat. I had no idea myself. I didn't apply for anywhere else other than Watford, but I had no idea what to expect. And I think it is a different kind of person. It's simply in time, in attitude, the fact that you can't build your own career because you've got to win the seat, and when you've got the seat, you can't say, well, I want to go around in the back seat of a Toyota Prius for 3 or 4 days a week pretending I'm important, because if you do that, you'll lose the next election. And there's got to be a way of taking from the pool of candidates certain people and giving them accelerated training. It may be financial, depending on their circumstances. In the United States, in the swing states, for Congress, they make them sign a contract. I don't think it's ever been litigated on, probably about the only thing in the United States that's not. But it says you will be expected to do so many hours, to raise so many dollars, and do this, and it's your responsibility. If we did that, people would run. But it has to be done. We need a kind of super candidate who knows what to expect. They may be eccentric and mad, most of my family, most of the people I know within the party tried to talk me out of doing it, that knew what it was, including our current chairman, who's a friend of mine. He'll tell you, Andrew Felmy said, "You must be bloody mad." But it is different, and you've got to. It's a different kind of thing. So I think the party's got to be a lot more sophisticated with candidates. So many people go for safe seats. They've got very good career paths and end up running the country. And I'm very pleased that one of them is in this panel, because, Greg, if you had to deal with the kind of rubbish that we did, you could not do such a good job. And it's impossible to do the two things. So the sooner we accept that, and that people know what they're letting themselves in for, I think it would be a lot better.
Well, I will respond. I don't think you should make that difference. I conduct myself in my seat, which has always had a decent majority, in exactly the same way that you do and Uppal does. I'm out every Saturday on the doorstep. I'm on top of every local issue, because I enjoy it. It's my role. That I'm the champion of my constituents, and I think it's true to say that over time, I think perhaps we have had people who haven't had that appetite for the job, frankly, because that's an important part of the job. And so I wouldn't restrict your requirement to marginal seats. I think it's for everyone.
No, I didn't mean this in terms of in any way to be disrespectful to you. As it happens, I've been campaigning with you in Watford. I know what kind of campaigner you are. But in time terms, particularly in time terms, and in the fact that you never, it's like being a candidate all the time, every day of your life, and it is different. And I do think people should realise that in advance. That was my only point. And it's not for everybody.
I'm just going to let Paul
I'm just going to provide a quick way through this. I mean, I'll illustrate with an example. This morning I went to an event in Wolverhampton at 7:30 this morning. There's a breakfast thing. Wolverhampton Better Together. It was a total, sort of pitch for the Labour Party. I was expecting them to fly the red flag. They had William Keegan from The Observer saying that everything the government had done from an economic perspective, and the whole audience was there, and that was the sort of thing. What you do when you're fighting a seat like that, you're up against the Labour machine. Now, sometimes it is a machine. It is vicious. It is pernicious, and that's the only thing. Sometimes, I know, Greg, you're a great campaigner and all that. That's sometimes I just think making candidates aware of that. Somebody did actually, who's in this room, Chris is here, did actually tell me before I was getting selected, he said, "Well, you have no idea what you're letting. The Labour Party will go from you for day one." And I didn't actually, it's like when somebody tells you about having kids, I think your life's going to change. You never ever believe them, and then when the kid arrives, you go, bloody hell. But it's exactly the same in a marginal seat.
All right, I'm going to open up to the floor. There's lots of hands, so we'll take the batches of questions in three. I'll start on this side and then I'll go to this side. So, gentleman at the front, gentleman in the middle there, and gentleman at the side.
Tom Gunnar from Airbus Defence and Space, and I should say, just as a little plug for the space agenda, the Satellite Applications Catapult is looking at a number of smart applications of satellites, including using satellite data in a pilot study at Milton Keynes to check for observance of planning applications and planning rules. The question I wanted to ask was the one reference to the Scottish referendum was from Paul, and I'm surprised it wasn't referred to more by the other panellists. Daniel Hannan recently suggested that devolution should be taken further into the cities. Is there not a view that the Conservative Party is still seen as a bit of a London-centric party, at least south-east-centric? And is there not a policy response in the light of the Scottish referendum result and the strong number of people who voted yes for a greater policy move towards the cities and into the cities?
Great, thank you. Gentleman behind you.
Hello, I was a councillor in Camden, central London, from 2006 for 4 years. Boris won London, but he won it on the outer boroughs. Central London was a Boris-free zone in that election, in both of these elections. When I went round my neighbourhood knocking people's door, I knocked on the Nigerian lady's door, and I asked her whether she voted Conservative. She said, "I don't vote Conservative." "Why not?" "You don't like black people. Black people don't vote for Conservative." I was having a conversation with someone from central Glasgow, a brother of a friend, and I was talking to him on the eve of the referendum, and I said, "Oh, I guess it's the first time you've ever spoken to Conservative." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah." I said, "You don't know anybody who's a Conservative?" "That's right," and he lives in central Glasgow. You look at the fringe meetings that take place in this convention, and you find there's very little in there about in the cities. When you go to my area of interest, housing fringe meetings, you find everybody's talking about greenfield development. Nobody's talking about provision of social housing.
Yeah.
So in central areas or urban centres, you have conservative free zones. Nobody knows conservatives, they don't come into contact with conservatives. You're actually starting from zero, absolute zero, and we don't register likewise on the consciousness of the party. And when I introduced myself to a shadow minister before the 2010 election as a Camden councillor, that lady physically jolted because she didn't even know there were conservatives in Camden.
Sure.
So the point I'm making is, when you get George Osborne standing and talking about benefit cuts, you're there saying, well, thanks, George, because you've just made my job a lot harder. Because when people in leadership open their mouths, it's not even in their minds the repercussions of what they're saying on votes and consciousness of people in central London, however meritorious their messages.
Perfect. A really good point, and we'll certainly come back to that. And the gentleman at the side there, thanks.
Sorry, thanks very much. I think I have a kindred spirit here because I'm a newly elected councillor in Brent, so we have 6 against 56 Conservatives, so I know a little bit about lost causes. But I would just go back to credibility point. I was just wondering what the panel think about using councillors to build credibility through responsiveness to very local issues, and particularly in London, showing that monolithic Labour boroughs are not very responsive, in fact, to the residents because of the complacency of being in power for a long time. And Conservatives, on a ward-by-ward basis, can show that they are responsive, they live in the area, they're local, and that must be a way of building the credibility that Paul discussed.
Great. Some really 3 great questions. So we've got sort of policy response to the referendum and devolution, which I'm going to throw at Greg, if you don't mind. Social housing, well, lack of contact with inner city voters and the effects of sort of national policy on urban areas.
Messaging.
And the third element is use of Tory councillors to sort of show up weaknesses in Labour strongholds. So, Greg, do you want to take the first point?
Sure. I think there is a very clear requirement following the Scottish referendum to address the English question. And I see from the Labour conference last week, I think there's an attempt to muddy the waters here and say, well, what we need to do in England is to have devolution to the cities. Absolutely right. It's very important that we should do that. That is something that we have been doing. The Labour leader of Greater Manchester, Sir Richard Leese, said that we've done more in our 4 years to devolve power to cities than the previous government, his government, did in 13 years. So we are the ones that have turned the dial on that. But that is not the same as devolution, as it were, to England. There is an anomaly that needs to be corrected. I stood on, we all stood on election manifesto last time to say that we would correct the anomaly. I think we have a mandate for that. The Scottish referendum was based on the results of the 2011 Scottish referendum, when a majority of MSPs in Scotland were elected on a pledge saying that there should be a referendum on independence. They got that. We have, I think, the equivalent mandate, parallel mandate in England to correct the situation that has been inherited there. We should get on and do that, and we should do it quickly, but we should also have the devolution to cities that we've been the party that's been working on.
Michael, I'm going to let you take the second question.
I just want on the chat with the devolution question. I love the new Tory policy of spying from satellites on people's gardens. I think that's going to go down very well. But to that, I think the devolution argument does go. We looking at London. Clearly there's a discussion to be had about how much of the local taxation, business rates and so on gets kept within London, and I see that from Transport for London. We have to fight for the national pot of money for transport, and we're fighting against the tendency that says, it has to be spread equally, per capita throughout the country. And the problem with that is, kind of we're the capital, where more people are moving around faster and crossing paths and so on. So it's it would be a lot easier if we could just hold on to more of our own money and optimise London for Londoners. But that's a different discussion. To the point about the discussion. I was fascinated by your example of the Nigerian woman who has, would never vote Tory, because I would be willing to bet that her underlying values are fairly conservative. I bet she doesn't let her kids run riot. I bet she's resilient. She's probably an entrepreneur and so on. And also, fascinatingly, if anybody's asking, is she a voter if she's Nigerian? Well, if she's got a right of residence, then she is a voter, absolutely. Which comes to I think it comes to partly how we message. And I spend half of my life talking to people who are very concerned about the climate and very concerned about shifting to clean energy, but who think that Tories have nothing to offer on that. But actually we do. We're going to solve those problems because the left certainly isn't. But it does come down to, I think your point about we're starting from zero, we've got to build the infrastructure is also exactly right, because that woman who is, that Nigerian woman, she is going to vote in local elections, she's going to vote in mayoral elections, but then you've got the European elections, you've got the national elections, and we just don't have, I do hear you about the brand has to be trusted, absolutely, but also you've got to have the infrastructure to know who to wield when and in which direction into each segment of your Camden constituency or your Brent constituency. And at the moment, we're running around with one message, one tool, and nobody, thin on the ground or non-existent, and we'll never get that.
Well, yeah, no, to continue the analogy, I mean, there's no point having the menu if it's not the right menu for people to eat. But but can I just mention the councillors thing? Because again, at the moment, and again, I'm afraid it comes back to the structure of the party, that the association, whether it exists in fact or fiction, selects the council candidates and selects independently the Member of Parliament candidate for Parliament. It's got to be part of one strategy. So, for example, if someone stands for council in an urban area, they've got to know that part of their job is to try and get a Conservative Member of Parliament elected. It's not separate, and Mayor if there is directive. It's not separate, it's part of an integrated strategy. Most candidates complain they can't get councillors to do everything because the councillors believe they're doing their duty to the council, because it's not part of an integrated strategy. And we can't allow that. But not in an area where we've got paid full-time staff as I want to have. It's all part of the same strategy. Of course they're integrated. One should help the other. But in fact it doesn't. And particularly in the areas where we're very weak with volunteers, they're very, very separate. So I really take the point. I think councillors are not second class, not second rate, not in any way inferior. It's part of the same strategy, which is to get our menu distribution to every house, every street in the country.
I'm going to open up some more questions. There's a gentleman at the back, and we'll take a couple at the back, and then we'll move forward to the gentleman at the front here.
My name's James Daly. I'm the parliamentary candidate for Bolton North East, which I suspect is a similar seat to what Paul's been talking about. And I just wanted to reiterate that I think the most pragmatic and sensible thing that I've heard in the whole of this conference is what Paul has said in respect of the problem is not there are not in seats such as mine that people that do not respond to what we are saying, or should we say a right of centre message. The problem is there is no emotional connection. So people will vote for me potentially, who voted for Labour last time because I'm quite well known in the community, get out and about and do things like that. The problem comes when the Conservative part of it comes along with me on my shoulder, and so I feel that in seats like mine, I feel that our national message, I'll put it that way, is not, if it could be amended, tailored, however it is to put, the emotional people in Bolton, when they look at the national politicians and the national message, they're not interested in detailed observations on policy. They want to see somebody nationally who they can look at and say, yes, you stand up for me, I like you, there's something about you.
So you're not talking about policy,
you're
talking about people and presentation.
I don't think elections, unless you're a bunch of lunatics, but elections aren't won on great policy, because elections are won on trust and how you feel emotionally about something. And if you have that, then we'll win elections. If you don't have that, we won't win elections.
Sure. I'm just going to take up the turn then before we can come back to that. Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name's Chris Clarkson. I'm councillor in Salford, so I'm a fellow Greater Mancunian. Does the panel think there's anything to perhaps reforming the way that we select city seats? At the moment we've got the City Seats Initiative, which is effectively us saying nobody really wants these seats, we're going to have to do something with them. And we've got to the stage now in Greater Manchester where out of 27 seats we've only selected 9 with 8 months to go. And if we're talking about long-term strategies to win some of these seats, and some of them are extremely winnable. I mean, if you go back to 2008, our high watermark, we were actually carrying quite a lot of these seats on the local elections. And then we got wiped out in 2010. Is there any logic to the way that we're currently doing it, and is there a better way of selecting those seats, do they think?
Sure. Just to thank Richard, he has to shoot off. Thank you very much. And just to take this third question, there was a gentleman here.
Thank you, Chris.
Sorry, there's just
thank you. Paul referred to one aspect of Wolverhampton South West earlier that really does need examining in context of other urban seats. 40% BME vote. Now, unless we as a party can get into that BME vote in the urban seats, we are not going to win urban seats. Paul knows the battle that we had in Wolverhampton South West. It's not a 6-month one, it's not a year one, it's years of effort that needs to go into that battle. And we need, basically, in a lot of the urban seats, we have to have BME candidates, because the Labour Party is so entrenched in the BME community that I have to say a white candidate won't crack it.
Sure. I'm just going to actually plug Policy Exchange again very quickly. We had a piece of work out about 3 months ago that said showed by 2050 a third of the population will be non-white. And where do they all live? These different communities, they are based around predominantly urban areas, but they're spreading out. And so you're absolutely right, there are huge issues with different minority communities. I'm going to ask Paul to take 1, 2, 3 of those points.
I'll answer it, and I'll also try and, because I didn't get a chance to answer the Camden question as well, about the Nigerian lady, which will probably tick quite a few of the boxes. Interesting that the Trevor Phillips research as well, which I'm surprised nobody's spoken about the real contrast between the way the white vote is voting, particularly in London and the South East, and the BME vote is voting. There is a role reversal of almost 1 in 5, 20% of only 1 in 5, 20% of voters within London actually only voting Labour. And there's a total role reversal in terms of Conservative as well, from a BME perspective. Okay. Chris is right. We've spent years talking about this, Chris, haven't we? And it is a long-term project. Probably one of the most interesting narratives I've heard about this is from Jeb Bush, actually, who came and addressed the parliamentary party some time ago. Because Republicans, of course, face exactly the same problem across the water in the US. You know, if the Democrats basically get the Hispanic vote and the non-white vote, they win. They get the keys to the Oval Office. And can the Republicans actually win? And Jeb particularly had an interesting narrative about, as a country of immigration, just trying to change that narrative from a Hispanic perspective, of just broadening the debate out. John Major did this recently as well, just talking about the whole concept of people coming 5,000, 6,000 miles, you know, leaving their extended families, leaving security, taking a risk and coming to the UK. Now, how do we balance that with a debate and a narrative about immigration which still holds up the core vote? That's the tightrope we as a party have to walk. And I think sometimes us just talking about this in a sensitive way, and just making this point. I mean, my own family is East African Sikh, and one thing that gets lost on this is that first-generation immigrants are incredibly patriotic. We just don't talk about this often. They've come to a country which has actually often given them haven, given them refuge in very difficult circumstances. And immigrants, secondly, are self-selecting. The Sikhs or Hindus or Muslims who generally settled within the West Midlands are not representative of the sample population they've come from. These are the people who will take risks. They will leave their families. They'll go the extra yard. And when you can have that ambitious narrative about that and make that connection, and also tell them that we don't actually dislike them, that we do actually give a damn, because we appreciate and value the contribution they've made. If you can do that in the right way, I think you can tick a lot of the boxes that we're trying to do with these questions.
Absolutely
And that's the root of the problem. Is I think that there is, as a party, we are still ambivalent. I'm sorry, but I think that's exactly right, to be able to go there and say we really value the risks you've taken, the contributions you're making, the entrepreneurship, and so on. And I think I'm sorry to say, but we don't all feel that way. I very strongly do. I'm also the son of immigrants, and so I feel very welcomed, and I very much would want to project that welcome to BME voters, to essentially to anybody who wants to take advantage of the opportunities offered. But I just think that as a party we're not there, and of course but there's a big chunk of the party that says we should do the exact opposite because we've got a risk from UKIP, and that the way to respond is to actually invoke lots of anti-immigrant inflammatory rhetoric, because that will shore up our short-term votes. It is short-term, medium-term, long-term, unacceptable and wrong.
Great.
Well, Michael's absolutely right that we do need to be enthusiastic about I think the contributions that people are making. One of the things that really moved me when I was a councillor in London, and I think many of you will have experienced this, there are citizenship ceremonies for people who are becoming citizens of this country. They were actually introduced by David Blunkett, I think it was, when he was Home Secretary. It was a party who I think we were a bit snippy about and thought this was some sort of gimmick. But actually, when I was sitting in the council house and seeing the people that were immensely proud to be taking the oath to the Queen, brought dressed in their best clothes, bringing their family, wanting pictures to be taken with the mayor. If ever you needed convincing that these are people that absolutely share our values, that we should be completely on the same page with, then you just need to participate in some of those ceremonies. That was, frankly, an idea not that we should have opposed. We should be coming up with ideas like that, suggestions like that, to show, to demonstrate what all of us in this room and in the conference hall feel, that there is a huge potential connection there that we have with people who may never have considered voting for us in the past. Just as, frankly, our predecessors managed to make connections when politics in this country was more class-based than it became. We broke that connection. We made it very clear that people whose fathers and mothers may not have voted Conservative, they can and should. We were able to do it. We made those connections, and we should absolutely set our minds on doing that again.
I'm really sorry, we've actually hit the hour allocated, so I'd just like to thank our wonderful panel for spending time to speak to us, and for all of you for making the effort to come to us. So thank you very much.